Hello, everyone. I'm Michael DeBruzzo, owner of Canine One. Today, I have a very special guest, Peter Lynn, a successful dog trainer renowned for his expertise in following the principles of LIMA, least intrusive, minimally aversive, created by Steven Lindsay. These guidelines are instrumental for professional dog trainers in making competent decisions that support both the dogs and their owners, ensuring a harmonious quality of life together. Recently, Peter faced an unfortunate situation where he was expelled from the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants, the IAABC, for allegedly violating their modified LIMA guidelines. This incident raises significant concerns for our profession as it highlights the potential conflict between adhering to written guidelines and truly serving the best interests of dogs and their owners. Peter is here to share his journey, his commitment to LIMA, and to clarify what really happened with the IAABC. Welcome, Peter.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much. It's for anyone who wants to listen or hear about LIMA and how it's intended. I'm always happy to talk about it.
Well, I'm certainly very excited to have you here, Peter. We were actually brought together and connected from LIMA, actually. You know, that's what brought us together to conversation. And you have actually a great Facebook page about Cynopraxis and Steven Lindsay's teaching, which is another place where I connected with you. And I'm very excited to have you here because we share this common love for Steven Lindsay's work and LIMA. So Peter, tell me where in your training career you found Steven Lindsay's work and what problem or problems did it specifically solve for you?
Okay, so I was continuing to read, and I found a thank you, sort of an acknowledgement in Mary Birch's work, I think, to Steven Lindsay. And I didn't know his work, so I got his work, and it solved it. All of a sudden, instead of just fixing a problem, it fixed a problem, his ethics, within a certain context, which is Cynopraxis. And that all of a sudden, when I went to a home, my job now was, my exchange with the owners was that my job was to fix the owner had a problem maybe with the dog, and the dog maybe had a problem with the owner. And my job was how to improve that. How can I make that better? While at the same time, how can I make the dog's quality of life better? So before I was sort of stuck. Now I have like this ethics, and what I get out of it is that they're relating better and the dog's quality of life is better, right? And then they have plenty of that to give, like sort of, here's my problem. I have my time. I have to support myself. I get paid. But that's like a fair exchange. And then when I go to the car, you know, I feel really affirmed and good about myself because I've done my job. And because of, and that would be, all of a sudden I had a way to do that. And I also knew his work is such science-based and so solid, I could trust it. So that would be how one of the things that the problem it solved for me. And it also, we'll get to, it gave me 3 general guidelines to help me think through problems on how to do that.
Okay, great. What I want to do, Peter, is for the listeners that are not going to understand these concepts, and Steven Lindsay has 1,500 pages of amazing work, and by the science, you know, anyone listening, like, we're concentrating on this ethical, guidelines in Steven Lindsay's books, which is pretty much the humane standards of practice of like how us as trainers make our decisions about the training process. It's one aspect of his books. And when Peter is talking about some of the science, like you can take one concept in Steve's book. Like this is going on a little bit of a tangent. Like I was in his books looking up territorial aggression. This is just an example, right? And you would not believe how deep into the science with scientific references Steven Lindsay's literature will go into just something simple as territorial aggression that adds clarity to it, so you truly understand the issue before you could even address it. All right. Now, you could think of any behavior problem that's really out there. There are 3 huge volumes of very scientifically referenced material to help guide you. And what I'm going to have Peter do is go through some of these concepts that are just based off of the decision-making process, which could be a common denominator to any trainer, no matter what techniques they have in their tool belt that they're favoring, that works really well as a common denominator and makes us feel good. What he just mentioned about feeling good and affirmed as a trainer and the owner feeling good about the training session is something that I share with Peter. So Peter, what I want you to do is, I did put these like very simplistic definitions of Steven Lindsay's work, as a disclaimer that this is not Steven Lindsay's words, but I'm trying to simplify it in a way just so we have a basic understanding of what it is. Can you go through each of these? Keep it simple, and can we take something like maybe an invisible fence system or anything else you can think of, and you could deviate from that as how each of these may apply to something that we're all familiar with, like an invisible fence system. I'm using this as an example because it involves it can involve a very high level of electric shock, right? Which is like something that is like a big no-no, right? In a lot of these organizations to even think about using an aversive as strong as an electric shock, right? But can you explain sort of each of these steps? Can you start with Cynopraxis and just work your way down for the listener? And remember, these are most of my listeners do not have a strong background in Steven Lindsay's work.
Sure. So, well, that was what I started with, the idea that, let's say I go to a home and we will use an underground fence area idea. And if we can get the dog, let's say, the way they're relating, and a dog is, let's say the dog successfully, and we probably see this, trained on an underground fence. There were 3 in my own family. And you see them where I am in New York, Westchester, in this area, there's a lot of them. I don't know, some of the listeners there might not be, but you'll see the dogs all relaxed. And just and the advantage is the owners come out and they're playing, and the dog, it gives us so much opportunities, and the dog actually knows how far it can go. So the dog feels very secure. And so their relationship is better. And then there might be opportunities, the dog's quality of life is better. It's not just kept on a leash. They can play fetch, do things. It doesn't mean it has to replace the walks. And, I know, for example, my parents adopted a dog from a veterinarian locally. And part of the thing is, they can let the dog out briefly if the dog needed to go to the bathroom. It didn't take away from the walks. And so let's think of all the advantages. That would be, right, the great thing. And then the question we'll answer later is, how is that possible? How do they get like that? Because that's interesting. Like, how do they get so relaxed? And we want to come back to that. But so when I, go to a home first, let's say a client wants that, you have to understand, and does that answer your question, Michael, about Cynopraxis, that it's about that human-dog relationship? Let's say we went through the training, that how they relate, and also the owner now is so much more relaxed and not worried of their dog running out or running away. Where 30 feet away are cars on pavement going 35 miles per hour, and there's real danger to them. But instead, the dogs are safe and staying on the yard. Does that make does that answer that first question for you about the relationship's better and the dog's life and quality of life gets better as it goes along? And
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to read because some people may be listening to this and not see the screen, right? So, Cynopraxis is right enhancing. You're going in there, and we're talking about an invisible fence system. Is the purpose of the training? The goal should be to enhance the human-dog relationship. Get that dog out in the yard, right, with the owners while they're enjoying the yard together versus the dog being put away somewhere, and also to improve the quality of life of the dog, right? It should, if it makes sense, and we can do that, that would be one of the goals of the training, right? So, through the Cynopraxis, not just the invisible fence. That's really anything. The common denominator.
Right.
So, can you explain the Hydra and Proteus side effects? Like, what is it? What is the Hydra? What is the Proteus? Like, what is meant by this before we give an example? Like, what does this mean to you as a trainer in general?
Okay, so let's say the Hydra is related to, this is sort of a cautionary thing of how using aversives or using certain training techniques, they can be treats too, can cause more problems. So Hydra it comes from a Greek myth. You would cut off his head and 6 more problems would grow. So, for example, sticking with the underground fence issue, an owner has a dog and they do not get the dog fully comfortable with the yard first. They just get a dog and say, okay. And that's one of the critical things they have to. So the dog just gets its first, we'll call it pulse stimulation, which is actually what we can get away with, which is gets its strong correction and goes, whoa, and it runs back to the house because the house the dog is comfortable with and feels safe. Now you have a dog that now doesn't want to leave the steps. So you've created a bigger problem because of improper training there. A second example where it might morph into a bigger problem is if you have an aggressive dog, say a dog that has an aggressive problem, and someone comes onto the yard, or a child or another dog, and so it's not the fault of the fence. It's just it's dangerous to that. And then there's certain dogs, because when you come into a house, you always have to start with who's the dog. And there's certain dogs that just shouldn't be on that. And that might be a judgment, like there's certain, like a Malinois that's sitting next to me, like that dog it's not appropriate. That dog might just go, I'm going to go through, or it could work, but I'd rather it didn't, I'd rather not with that dog. So that's the Hydra part. The Protein's a little different. And I think it's how, if you're trying to, the way it works, there's this another Greek god that you would hold. If you want an answer, you got to freeze him. But you got to keep him there. But if you don't, he morphs into something bigger too. So I know we're talking about underground fences, but here might be an example of, if you put a dog in a crate because it's running around too much, it sits in the crate and then it builds up more energy. And then when you let the dog out, and it sees maybe kids running by and getting more, and so when you let the dog out, that energy is released into this more problem, a hyper dog running around, and it can become a bigger problem. So there are little subtle differences, but you can get the general idea is that, can I give one more? The Proteus might be, you're walking a dog and you're holding them back. Again, you didn't get them to stop pulling, but you're holding them back. And, actually, all right, I'll do that. And then you're holding it back, and then there's frustration being built up slowly if it wants to say hello to another dog. And then let's say the harness starts to pinch after a while. And let's say that dog, has some issues, then it can turn into aggression. Because anger, sort of frustration resonates with anger, and then if you add a little discomfort, more pain, it can lead to aggression. So that could be one thing. But there's also another part of this that's important, and we all do it in training, but we can. Hydra is also related to, let's say with the invisible underground fence, you set it at a very low level at first, and the dog gets it, and then just gradually do it higher and higher. The dog actually can learn, it has problems later, because the dog might go, that's not such a deterrent. It's not such a motivation to get out of it, and you actually then have to go so high to actually get the dog to learn, I better not go through. And later, when we come back to it, the real relief, it's the wonders. We'll get back to why that's also a problem later, why you want to start higher. But that would be an example of it also getting in a problem. Some other problems that can turn into something, one other, say, is common human error, is we just take off the collar, or we keep it too loose, or we let the batteries out, and the dog gets confused, because all of a sudden the dog goes through. And now you've created more of a Hydra problem, where the dog, its expectation is now, wait, I got through. And it gets through, it might just keep going, I'm going to run through. Or if the dog does get its first big correction, and you don't bring the dog back in the yard, but it keeps going, it feels a sense of it's something it needs to escape from, and it goes forward. And that's the last thing you want it to learn, is to run to the road to escape. Mm-hmm. Lastly, system-wise, one company, the Invisible Fence Company, has it so now that if the dog goes out, it can actually reset and come back in, which is really good. But before, it can cause more trouble, right? You're trying to keep the dog in, the dog gets out, and now the dog actually can't get back in, and it can be in the middle of the road, and that's a real danger, right? So that creates more of a problem. There's subtle ones, there's subtle other problems with that, but there's a couple that are false. That I want to say is like these other. Well, it doesn't cause anxiety if the dog runs and gets a correction while seeing a person. They would need scientific proof, and there isn't any on that. It doesn't melt. The collars don't melt into their skin. What they do need to do is make sure they're made bigger as the dog gets older, because it can go into their skin, and they need to take them off. So it's really, does that give you a sense of how it can lead to some problems in the actual training process? Can make it worse?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. So Hydra and Proteus side effects, in a nutshell, this is part of the decision, process, where you need to know what you're doing. It's a cautionary thing about competence, right? If you're using, whether it's reinforcement or punishment improperly or excessively, the problem can get worse, or it could turn into something else, and you never actually fix it, right? Can you go into the next one? Explain the dead dog rule. Give a nice simple definition, and then explain how this also helps to guide your decision making with your clients.
Sure. So the dead dog rule, it really says right here, I'll read, training outcomes should be framed in a way that a dead dog could not do. So you wouldn't want to. So let's see. It can make you a positive trainer right off the bat, because you're trying to shape your training objectives into something that you want, your goal would be. Okay. And, it puts, let me say, I want to say this, if you don't mind it, we're trying to keep this to the underground fence, right? But one of the main reasons was that dead dog rule relates to aggression. So is that all right if I give that as an example? All right. Yeah. So if you say a dog does not bite, okay, the way you would test that is does it match what a dead dog can do? And you'd say yes. So therefore it wouldn't be a training objective, because not bite doesn't give you even though you might want that, and that's what it doesn't give you really information that the dog is safer, right? So that's more of suppression. And so what we'd want to do is, let me see if I can show where I actually wrote some of this down, so it'll make it easier for you. Just to put it in perfect language that's simple. So pretty much you're going to convert your training goal into something that, yikes, give me a second.
Well, sure.
That's the plan. Go ahead.
So it's basically a safeguard from incompetency, people just thinking they could suppress everything, right? Like, you don't want a trainer that's just punishing dogs for all their bad behaviors and not really having some sort of behavior for them to do instead that's going to support the Cynopraxis, right? Like I know me with my training, if I have a dog that's reactive when we're walking down the street towards other dogs and people, I'm not going to tell a client, well, do this to punish them for being the aggressive, to stop them from doing it, right? Instead, I'm going to focus on, when you're in that situation, let's train the dog instead to heal nicely and look at you, to look at you and interact with you while you talk and praise, and maybe give the dog something, good during the process. And, and that's what the goal is, versus, okay, we're going to stop that. I mean, just going out and using maybe the same tool. Like, I may use certain tools to help to teach the dog to heal, versus using the same tool to just punish. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do this. Then we have a dog that's not doing anything, and there's improving the dog's quality of life or the relationship, that exchange, but that positive exchange between the owner and dog.
Yeah. So in situations where there was aggression in the past, you want to train the dog to be more friendlier, tolerant, playful, and obey commands, right? And this is something a dead dog can't do. Yeah. So that's one way to think of it. In a way, you don't even want to concentrate on the aggression. You want to go, what behaviors would show signs that there's improvement here? And what's great about all that is it allows you to qualify success. Oh, I'm seeing, you can interpret those signs, and you could be like, I can see them interacting in a better way. I can see the dog's jumping off the couch and wagging its tail, approaching. And so it converts it into an obtainable, training statement. And then you have all these, that's the critical part about this. Because if you just say not bite, that's where suppression comes in. That's where medicine comes in. They're all suppression. And they don't give you any way. You really want aggression to be predictable. So you don't want to suppress the growl. If a dog growls, you want that growl because that's a sign. Yeah. So you want aggression to actually be predictable. Go, oh, yeah, well, we got work to do. What you can do is, if the dog lunges, you don't want the dog to succeed. And so you might haul the dog off to a timeout room or something, in the bathroom for 30 seconds at that point. So the behavior just fails. You don't want it to work. If it works in keeping you away, then that's the dog succeeded in a behavior you'd rather not. So it's not saying, and so the dead dog rule, really, in other ways to think about it is, instead of not bark, you train a dog to bark on command. So then you have control of it. If you want to think of, there's a lot of ways to do it with jumping. Once a dog's learned, like, sort of, I don't jump, I know that rule. You say as a reward, the dog learns to sit and wait. Okay, hup. And a dog learns they like to jump. So they learn to jump on command, but they're controlling their impulses. So that's what the dead dog rule is doing. For counter jumping, a dog might learn, oh, I see the counter, I turn away. And so they're actively avoiding on their own, rather than just, instead of not jumping on the counter, because the dog can't. In a way, you can say, well, no, because you can't jump. You can't do that. You actually have to learn to avoid it, because a dead dog can't do that. So it's a good way to think through things. Yeah. And what it does is it shapes, but it does say, when you do use aversives to get there, it just means it has to be, I don't want to jump, but it has to be least intrusive, minimally aversive, which we'll get there. It means you just have to do it, and it shapes. It's basically part of reward-based training, which we'll get to. It means that with the underground fence, it will be the dog will actively avoid the fence, right? Going through the fence and come back and feel relaxed. So we'll go through. We'll get to that. But does that give you a sense of how to think about? You just sort of make the equation there. Go ahead.
It gives a lot of clarity to the training outcome. So like with the invisible fence system, like I said, it's not just about, okay, we're going to train this dog not to go through the barrier. We're going to train this dog to enjoy and have fun in the yard, right? Not going through the barrier is part of the process, right? But that's not your outcome. You don't go in, like I say, if you go in and that's your outcome, you're not going to be, if that's your goal, you're not paying attention to the important stuff that supports the quality of life of the dog, really. And
you said that before, and I missed that. That's part of the dead dog. You're so right? Because you said that before when you were talking about the dog walking on the leash, and I was stumbling around for my notes, and you said like, no, and the dog learns a new expectation. Okay, but so you're teaching avoidance there, and follow me and do this. But with instead of what was squirrel chasing, right? You're going to say instead of squirrel chasing, the dog's going to learn to stay within the yard and play fetch with a ball. Yeah. So you've replaced it, and now you find something active that you can do together, and that improves how you relate to each other. And so there's also emotional things, right? You decrease your worry would be part of dead dog rule. I'm not worried the dog's going to run off the yard. You decrease the frustration between the two of you sometimes. The dog is lunging at other dogs. Now the dog isn't. Like and all that makes you relate better, to each other, and then makes the dog's going to get a better quality of life having the free run of the yard rather than being stuck on the leash its whole life over some. We'll get to that, the other part, like why you might, the other group. So does that give us a good start?
Yeah. Peter, this brings us to LIMA. Especially since this is the concept that relates to what happened with the Iaabc. Can you explain what LIMA is and perhaps give an example?
Yeah. So let's continue with the underground fence, and I'll explain how the least intrusive, minimally aversive principle is applied to this. But first, I'll just put you through some of the steps of it. Let's say you have a dog, you first get them comfortable. That's the critical part, fully with where the yard is. So the dog has done things there. We've practiced a little obedience, maybe having him come, get a treat sometimes come. He learns if he comes, then he's released to have more fun in the yard, to be free in the yard. And then the day comes. And the dog's been wearing the collar for a couple of weeks, so the dog doesn't think it's the collar. And we choose a spot maybe where it's most likely for the dog to run out if given the chance. And let's say we choose the actual driveway where the dog goes for 2 walks a day in this case. And now the dog comes out and he's on a long line and he starts to run up the hill, let's say past a tree, and then he's like, wait a minute, I'm free. And he's surprised. He thinks this is great. And he starts running in this new sense of going, I'm going to get to the street here and have a good time. The owner then, let's say I raise my hand and I say, and she goes, stay. And there's a reason why we'll come back to why we shout that. And then the dog hears the tone. And then there's the actual high pulse stimulation. It's very high. And the dog feels all of a sudden like a real, what just is happening to me? It feels a threat. And it hurts. And the dog wants to escape. Then we use the leash and we turn the dog back. And as the dog turns, we say their name, Leo, come. And it's the first time actually probably in that dog's life where the name and the come has actually been with an escape to safety, not just pleasurable for the fetch and the treats. This is new. That dog is whoa, and runs and right to the owners, me and the owner, just a few feet away. And it's feeling what's happening internally. This is in the science. It's going through a sudden relief. Whew. If you've been followed by a police officer, and you're like, what's going on here? And then he veers off a street to the right, and you're like, whew. But it's got to be. So here, you're feeling there's physically happening for about 15 seconds. The dog's feeling an internal sense of relief. And at that moment, we associate, good dog, you're just good. And we touch and petting. This will become important. All this is going to help us. That's going to be linked up as a safety signal. Good. There you go. And then we take 2 or 3 minutes and we walk the dog all around the property. We might play. And the dog's, again, going, okay, this is safe. We're not letting the dog get any near the flags or near the correction. And it takes about 2 or 3 minutes for that body to go through a full relaxation process. This is science stuff, and I'm sorry if it's confusing. And I would never really explain science with a client. They don't want to hear it from a dog trainer. I might just go, your dog successfully succeeded in escaping, which is true. And in that success, the dog's going through its reward of relief and relaxation. And then we might just take the dog for a walk, get in the car, drive off, and go for a nice walk and call it a day. Now, what's going to happen there is the aversive, okay, the minimally aversive was a lot in this case. It had to be a lot to motivate that dog to keep it into the yard. And it also, by being so high, the higher it up is, the more this opponent processing, this opponent feeling of relief happens. If it's just, and another way, like if you pinch yourself, this is in Lindsay's book, and you let go, there's a relief that happens. But if it was with this, the higher level, relax, the dog actually goes, whew. Now, you could do it again, but let's say no, that's good. And then tomorrow we set it up and we have some dog walk by and we shout, stay. And the dog either stops and hesitates. So in that moment, the dog's approaching. Am I free again? And then all of a sudden hears the word stay and goes, what? Whoa, I better, and hesitates. And in that little hesitation, it's like he's hitting a choice. Should I keep going? And if he stops, yay, the stay prevents him from going forward. Now the stay gets, and then we can call him, come. And he's going through the same relief. Phew, I avoided that. And I escaped to safety. This is very important concept. And so, by the way, by doing this stay and come, and the dog learns it, it gives you a way then to go into nature and have an underground fence. Because you go into nature and you go, stay. And the dog's like, I better stop. Come. And the dog learns to come, and it all gets linked that way. It actually really does help. That's what I meant by doing that. Lindsay often tries to get twofers as much as possible. Like you're playing fetch. The dog gets it. You call its name, come. And it links its name and come with fetch. The dog, when you come home and the dog runs to you, you say, come, because it wants to. These are all really important things. Now, this dog is learning this through inhibition. And what happens over the days of time is the initial fear is counter-conditioned. Meaning, and this is how, this is answers. How do we get these relaxed dogs out there? And the dog is given a chance to just, after time, it holds up. It can cap off its safety. It's secure. It knows how far it can go. That's a good feeling. And then escapes back. And the dog actually, it counter conditions any type of fear it initially had. And they actually become afraid. I mean, not afraid. They become relaxed, and nonchalant is the word. And you see this in dogs. So it's proven in their body, and it's proven in science. There's hundreds of tests with this. The opponent processing and such. So now, how's this related to least intrusive, minimally aversive? Okay, so minimally aversive is relating to, if this is all right to say the word pleasure, the dog really had pleasure, like this is going to be exciting, and then this happens, and that's not pleasurable. That was painful at first. The startling, the minimally aversive was a startle, and there was, and it felt that, and it came back. Is that clear, Michael, on that part?
Well,
I don't
this
want to
is
get
what
us lost.
no. This is what I would like to know. It's talking about
Okay.
LIMA, right? So least intrusive, minimally aversive, and you said that was a very high aversive, and it had to be that high. That was the minimum aversive. Why?
Yes.
Why couldn't you have gone lower? I know there's more to say, but tell me why you couldn't have went lower than that. Why was that minimally aversive for this situation, the invisible fence
Yeah.
situation?
To be effective. Why was it right? And because if I went too low with this dog, because I know the dog, say I feel the dog out, and if I go too low, that's how the dog can go, well, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. That's how you can get the Hydra and Proteus side effects. Then the dog's like, oh, I got to go higher. I got to go high. Then you have to get it so high, and it's a real problem. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
It has to be the right level. It can't be, that's competency, actually. You have to choose. It can't be less, it can't be more, ideally. That's what he means by cruel in his work. If it's more or less, that's incompetent. That's what incompetence means. You have to go, it's got to be the right amount. And so are you with me on, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
And the least intrusive is relating to when we say least intrusive, if we let the owner have this whole, let's say this works out, and it does often, right? It intrudes the dog. It's really intrusive is relating to freedom on the owner and the dog and their relationship. They no longer have to be tied to a leash. They can and walk the dog. Now they can have all that freedom together, and that improves the relationship. The imperative here is of LIMA and all these working through these guidelines and help you work it out is that it has to meet that it strengthens their relationship, how they relate to each other. It gets to be out there with the kids and all this, and the dog's quality of life. And it's interesting, it becomes almost purely positive because all you need, if you weigh that 1 to 5% of that needed aversive over the days and times the dog has been there for years, its whole lifetime, to be able to be outside and enjoy it, it becomes so small. And just like that, that's how fast we like that more than, and so there is that way. If you just think how small, and the dog, if you ask the dog, look, will you take this deal? And the dog will be like, you mean, am I going to be safe? I'm not, because the dog cares about living, right? I'm going to avert a harm if I do this. I'm not going to be, the owner is averting a harm. We are as a trainer, right? They're getting a huge life benefit, right? They are averting a harm. They're getting a benefit of life. The dog will be like, yeah, I'll take that. That's great. I have to learn this. And, we want the dogs to have pleasure, but we can't do this with pleasure only, even though people try and say you can. But let's not worry about them. So is that getting there? What least intrusive, minimally aversive is sort of working towards, and it relates to the dead dog rule. How do we put this into what we're looking for?
Yeah. So
okay.
I love this, Peter, because this is what I'm looking for, for the listeners to hear it from you, what it is, because like I said, you were kicked out for supposedly violating LIMA, right? We're going to go into their version what LIMA is. Like, let the listeners at least absorb how they feel about the real Steven Lindsay version. All right. So you go into there, and that least intrusive is, you're doing a plan, your training plan is meant to be least intrusive to the relationship and the freedom of that dog, right? You say the goal, it's goal orientated. And like you said, your plan is it's gonna mean a lifetime in that yard, running around with the family, playing fetch, freedom, not on a leash. And you're minimally aversive. That sounds really harsh, a high level electric shock. We can make it sound as bad as possible. That dog got a high level electric shock for a moment. However, it was minimal. I'm just repeating what you said to clarify it. That was minimal because if you would have done less off of your judgment, you could have risked the dog basically not caring about it so much and being like, and then next time running through, and then we have bigger problems, or the dog get hit by a car, worrying about the safety, or running other problems. And there's also competency involved here, right? Someone cannot even do this if they don't know what they're doing and they just cause the dog to now be scared to go out in the yard, right? Or something like that. So the least intrusive, right? So that minimally aversive, I like how you said minimally aversive to be effective, to support that least intrusive plan. You know, like every other plan, if you didn't do that, would involve maybe, right, the dog having to be on the leash or the dog not being allowed in the yard sometimes, right? Depending on what's going on in the neighborhood. But that plan is an example of least intrusive, minimally aversive would look like that, right? It's like someone hires a professional because it takes competency to get a dog that level of quality of life where they could be free in that yard with the family with no barrier. Sometimes people cannot buy physical fences. They're not allowed for whatever reasons, or it's just unreasonable. And like you said, we're talking a moment versus a lifetime, versus don't give the dog that moment versus a lifetime of aversiveness in another way, right? Being
can I add to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, can I add to that? Because you mentioned competency and I didn't follow through on that. That's what competency is. The purpose of LIMA is, by the end, it's not the starting point at all. People get worried and hung up. I just want you to know it's not the starting aversive. That minimal, it's the competency is about the end point, moving it, that each step, the means to get there and the ends, make it so that it's the least intrusive, minimally aversive condition at all. And you almost don't have any. That's why it's almost purely positive. And that's why, and something very important to say here is this is reward-based training. So when you say reward-based training, this is it, because it truly is. The dog is learning to escape to safety. And if it hears the warning tone, that's like a safety tone. Oops, I better run back to safety. So it becomes a safety signal, and the dog is actually going through a reward at those moments. And if you watch yourself during the day, the same things are happening to us. So I think one thing, even though it might not be, is this is reward-based training. Because then also, now the dog's on the property, and then we could do so much more reward. Come, sit, and training and play. It all becomes, but without that, I think you get the point there. I'm just so glad you brought up the word competency again, and the idea that this is reward-based training. We're averting a serious harm, providing a lot of benefit to the dogs and the dog's quality of life. And the dog wants to keep this up. We'll just it likes this. I'm feeling good out here. So I'm glad we started with, this is a good example, I think.
Yeah. And also it feels good, right? You've been trained, how many years have you been a professional dog trainer, Peter?
Been 28
years. 28 years. And have you ever had a client accuse you of being mean or abusive? Is like how, in general, how would you feel your clients treat you, or what would they say about you? How are you even getting your clients to be in business for this long? Is it because you have a reputation of being a mean trainer? And I know the type of neighborhoods that you were working on and that you were working in, and I know an abusive trainer would not last long in those type of environments over there. I know you're a pretty modest guy, but toot your own horn if you can. Like, what is the feedback that you're getting from your clients when you are working with them?
I don't know. We're happy together. It goes well. I don't know how else to. I really like working with my clients. I do, and I really like working with the dogs and seeing them, just subtle moments of them just being happier. You know, a man in a house with a dog, but all of a sudden I'm seeing him sit down and he's petting the dog while we're talking, like he just hadn't. And so I don't know. It's hard to, this isn't a good answer. I wouldn't be able to stay in it. I just really enjoy working with them, the people, and we have good relationships. I mean, we like each other, and they see I really care about their dog, and I care about them being happy too. So it's got to be Lima for them too. That's the part, right? And I'll talk to them, be like, "Is this possible?" And so I'm not going to answer that so well, but I hope that's good enough for them all.
I wasn't expecting you to, but I figured I'd try to give it a shot, And the reason why I'm putting on you on the spot there, Peter, is because I'm in the same general area as you, and I've been seeing your name around, and you can't last as a dog trainer in this area for that many years unless you are giving results to people that they're happy with, that you're solving problems and you're improving the quality of life and you're getting word of mouth, work and all that kind of stuff. A lot of these things that us trainers get accused of for using aversives only comes from other trainers that just are not using it, basically. But it's like you say, I know you told me that your clients are just completely unaware of that whole side of things. Like the clients they're unaware of what sort of goes on with these politics. They're aware of that. They're happy that you went there and you solved the problem. The common denominator is they want to enjoy their dogs more, and they want to see their dogs.
Yeah. And if I could add to that, it's true. Some of them, it defies common sense for them. When I tell them some of this stuff after, this has been going on, and like they can see how excited I am to go to the recent conference we did with Steven Lindsay. Like they know I'm into this and I wouldn't do anything to hurt their dog. And when something happens, I do, I think about it. It doesn't feel good to do it to these dogs when things happen. It stays with you. You think about it. Was there a better way? But they know, they just cannot believe, like one of these clients, they call them the PD. Watch out for the Professional Dog Training Association. They're going to come after you. Like they just cannot believe that this stuff happens at these. It just, how do you raise children? They always say things like that. But I think the main thing is with this, it's these guidelines can really help us think through a lot of problems and really benefit the dog and the people you work with. And you can feel good about it. Like in your heart, you can go, this feels good. You feel good about yourself. So is it time to get to is there more to say about this right now?
Well, yeah, this, I don't think we have to spend too much time in this because you did talk quite a bit about the pleasure and freedom interest of the dogs, but I wanted to bring attention to, that a Steven Lindsay, follower who's truly following his guidelines, who's truly looking out for the pleasure and freedom interest of the dogs, is going to be different from a trainer who is incompetent and is not going to use aversives and say, right, that they are being more humane because they're not using aversives. But, which I know you've mentioned this, we just didn't sort of, like talk about it as an important concept over here, that by not really looking out for the pleasure and freedom interest, like with the invisible fence, like if someone's like, nope, I don't believe in shock and I'm not going to do that, that they actually caused a different type of aversiveness, emotional pain, emotional distress and I know Steven Lindsay, these are just some of the examples that he puts in his book, like that if we're doing training that is relying a lot on restraint, right? Like that dog being on the leash, or tethered outside while the owners are having fun in the yard, or they're isolated, right? They're inside the house and they cannot be out, or they're deprived of things, because we're gonna make the dog very hungry, right, to make it stay inside the yard, or there's all these kind of intrusive rules of interaction and like tedious plans, like where they're gonna try anything besides using aversiveness, that there's dangers of not being able to look truly after as a goal, the long-term pleasure and freedom interest, which I just wanted to highlight, is that's what you were talking about, right there, and it's a safeguard. It's part of all these rules. It's one of our safeguards, like you said, with the Hydra and Proteus side effects. We need to know how to use aversives in the right way, because if we're making problems worse, we're not using it the right way, and you have to be aware of it. And the same thing over here. If we're relying too much on avoiding aversives to the point where the dogs are being isolated and not getting to go anywhere with anyone, or on the leash every place where we're intruding upon their pleasure and freedom interests. And before you go on to,
yes,
I want to get into the IAACP. I just want to sort of wrap this up, about Peter. I've been training for quite some time. I love to talk about dog training, and I've been in it about the same amount of time as Peter. So we've kind of lived these parallel lives doing completely different training methods. I talk to him and it's like, oh, I don't do it like that. That's different. But I feel very at ease talking to a trainer like Peter, because there's this common denominator of humane standards of practices where it's about the end. This is reiterating what he said, because all this just sort of leads to this, where it's not about the means, it's about the ends, right? Every part of the plan follows this compass and this guidelines, where we have this common denominator where even if we take different paths, ultimately we will always be able to agree. If I listen to how he did it, and if he listened to how I did it, if the end goal was, you know what, that dog is better off because of that, all right? The dog is better off, that has a great quality of life, and of course, anyone who's in it for the right reasons, right? Before I let you take over again, Peter, is of course we're always trying to better ourselves. We're always listening to each other. Because we use aversives does not mean that we're not going to try to favor the dog's preference for pleasurable activities, all right? Of course, we're always going to lead it to there, and the more we can, the better, but not at the expense of that end goal, which I also feel, because we're both professionals, I know we can agree about this, is we have an obligation as a professional. Someone pays us to get them to that point, and not just do something for us that makes us sound good, right? Oh no, we're not going to do that. That's mean. So pay me for way more lessons, and we're never really going to hit that particular goal. Or I'm going to blame you, or I'm going to blame your dog, or I'm going to say the dog's no good, you have to put it down. All right. But so that's kind of my 2 cents here, Peter. I really appreciate you talking about this, because
thank you, Michael.
I think hearing it from you, who's supposed to be the boogeyman, I want people to see the boogeyman, right? Let's can you sort of lead the viewers through what happened. I mean, just briefly say what the IAABC is, because a lot of people aren't going to even really know what that is. Just very briefly why you got involved, and then what happened.
Okay, sure. So the one thing I wanted people to, maybe I'll read you something. When I was, there came a time when I was like, I can't be the only one who's likes this work so much. And I wanted to find more people. And I thought, well, maybe one day there'll be an Institute for Cynopraxis Studies. So I started searching the internet for people. And I wasn't getting anywhere until I typed in the word LIMA. And then I found this group, the IAABC, and I contacted the actual president at the time, and he said, "Oh, can you help us rewrite this thing because we're about to?" And he sent me. Let me just find. Hi Peter. This is a rough draft of the IABC position statement on LIMA. Please let me know your thoughts. I appreciate your time and expertise as well as Steven's. So they were really trying to get it right, and that was good. And then it was it lacked some things, but it was a good try. And shall I keep going a little here? Let me.
Yeah.
So then okay, and then it became. This was the next president. She was writing to me because I was trying to explain things, and she goes, 15 years ago when I first rewrote LIMA, which the IBC was already using, but which obviously needed much sprucing up, I wrote to Lindsay. Oh, no, I'm not going to read that part. Things change, things improve. If you let them. Where did it say? Okay. She just went after me, like for saying, you don't need to hear this, but this happened a lot. Only reason to hold an antiquated definition is to support the things you don't want to change. This is true in religion, in training, and all sorts of other biased practices. All right, this is where it's important. Now, when people see LIMA, they think of the IABC. I offered LIMA to the APDT, and they took it. Ditto the CCPDT. Then came the joint standards. KPA joined on, and others are going to soon. The standard that LIMA is the LIMA that IBC has defined. That is an improvement over the original, just like the standard of care for STDs is now penicillin and not mercury and arsenic. Time marches on. We learn. We do the work. We get better. Don't eat mercury and arsenic. I just want you to know that's the type of tone you can get sometimes.
All right.
So
Wait, can we stop right there for a moment? Because I want to clarify some things. All right. So, what is this organization? Like, who is in this organization, and what are their qualifications? Or what do you need to be part of this organization?
I'm sorry, I'm not the right person to ask. We would have to ask, really some person at the board and say what, they have a mission statement. They're just, okay. You can just become a member. And I don't really know,
okay.
It's just I'm going to jump in.
Okay. I'm going to jump in here because I could be the bad guy over here because Peter, okay. You're very nice. You're a very nice guy. The international. If anyone's not aware, the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants is a professional organization. Where anyone who works with clients solving behavior problems for any animal can be part of that organization. And the qualifications to be a member are basically zero, right? You don't need to have any education. All you have to really do is just to agree whatever guidelines that they really have. But it's good to be part of a professional organization, right? Because it looks good, right? When you have, when you're getting clients, I'm a member of this, which is why a lot of trainers join these organizations. But it's in order to bring some context to the story. The reason why we're talking about this now is because Peter was going over a lot of concepts in Steven Lindsay's work, and LIMA is this one concept that relies on competency and understanding all these other concepts, also all these skills in science and understanding dog behavior and stuff like that, right? It's part of this big competency thing. And what we don't have enough time to talk about this whole stream is Peter's been studying this stuff for a long time, including extensively studying and Steven Lindsay's work and other trainers' work, and having lots of interaction with Steven Lindsay himself. And he's a very successful dog trainer who's working with people with real problems. Now, what I want to say to get off my chest, Peter, before you go forward, what happened is, So LIMA Peter joined this organization, and he was a godsend to this organization. And I know a lot of people loved him there and complimented him there, and he gave lots of good advice to other trainers that had no education. They're looking for support. And he's given very good guidelines for someone to go in and make difficult decisions to help people out. Now, because we're not going to have time probably to read the Iaabc's version of LIMA, and we could, of course, talk about how they took Steven Lindsay's published work, used his name, and completely changed it so it has nothing to do with competency. They rewrote it so it was only guidelines about that you basically use the least amount of aversives possible when training a dog, period, with no stated goal, right? No stated goal. Just you're only allowed to use basically treats. And if you're going to use aversives, you better have a really good reason, and you better check with us, and you better get approval and this and this. Now, you have to remember the reason why I said people don't need any qualifications to be in this organization is because all you need to do is to agree to their guidelines, which are written by people who also do not have experience or education using any of these tools, no education reading Steven Lindsay's work or anything else equivalent to it, which I don't believe there is anything that's equivalent to it. And I'm going to give an analogy, all right, so we understand what we're talking about. Peter, who's very educated, he was a teacher before he was a trainer. He's studying animal behavior, understanding how to work with clients, how to get results. He enters an organization where in order to stay in that organization, he's essentially gets a set of rules that is equivalent to a parent leaving children alone in a house and saying, here, if you want to give yourself something to eat, here, maybe start off here. You can make a bowl of cereal, or you can do that. But don't use a knife, right? Because you probably don't know how to use it good, cutting a sandwich, and you might cut yourself. Certainly don't use the stove or the oven, all right? Because things can really go wrong with that. However, we're dealing with children that don't know how to use that stuff. And these are maybe guidelines that you can give someone that knows nothing about dog training at all for safety, all right? But that's not what a professional is. That's not what Peter is, all right? But that's sort of what you're going to expect from this organization, all right? That there's these people in there, and this is the truth. And you can cut me off, Peter, if I'm wrong. I firmly believed, because I researched some of these people that are writing you the letters. One of these people, I won't say the names because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because this person leaves, another person replaces them. That was part of expelling you from there. Her business is nothing more than doing trick trading for clients that don't have any real problems with their dogs. All right, they're not in the trenches helping people that has the real dogs. They're kind of just doing what's fun and makes them feel good. All right, and it's very, very limited. And a lot of the people in these organizations that are making these rules, they're not really helping people. All right, there's a priority here. There's things. We're talking about LIMA here. We're talking about Cynopraxis. There is the person, the responsibility to the client in improving their quality of life is part of our responsibility. The responsibility to the dog and improving their quality of life is part of our responsibility. The quality of life, the relationship of them together is what's leading our decisions. Now, if Peter would have followed these guidelines, the priority is yourself, making yourself look good. That's all what it is. There's There's no client complaining about what Peter is doing. The dogs certainly are not complaining. They're living better quality of life, right? These guidelines, it's just guidelines. If we were to read it, no goal, nothing about competency. It's just do not use aversives, all right? And if you do, you better go through hoops, which are pretty much unreasonable for any professional to do. Stop your lesson and call up and talk to other people that don't have any qualifications to it'd be like me, approving like a brain surgeon's like decision to use like a scalpel blade to get into the skull or something. It's just really ridiculous. I know I went on a big tangent here, but I'm sorry, but I had to say this, Peter, because it really upsets me that this happened to you, because it's not just me saying it. Every trainer that I have worked with that knows you always talks about you are one of the nicest and most helpful trainers that they have ever met.
Well,
I wouldn't expect you. I wouldn't expect you to to admit it. But I just wanted to say it. Okay, so I want to get us back on track, Peter.
Sure.
You joined the organization. You actually helped introduce LIMA, and then after, it's sort of like a credential mill over there. People are kind of getting positions that don't necessarily have any education, and they're taking this LIMA, which they don't understand, and they're changing it so it looks prettier and prettier to hand over to the children so they can't burn themselves on the stove, basically, the equivalent of it, all right? And they wrote to you and say they evolved it, all right? They evolved it. It's now better, all right? When did you get this? Like, how did this even happen that you're getting this letter? What did you do that caused this exchange with them?
So they were considering getting rid of LIMA, possibly. This is recent. I think June, or maybe May, and I just said, hey, and I was commenting, and then people would say, wait a minute, you have to use an aversive in LIMA? People were, some things like this, and then they were saying, some would say, if you want to pass a test, if you want to actually get certified, you have to prove you don't need the aversive, something like this, right? So I wrote, and this is relevant to us because it's relevant to the other part of the minimal aversive, is I gave an example about a dog on a counter and how, and I could read it, but because if I read it, I think it would make sense. And if I read it and I'm sorry and it's longer and you don't want it.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
You
okay. So I said when an aversive is needed to achieve those ends, they cut it out of, I'm sorry, it's a little out of context because that's what they took it out of context. Either by intruding on the dog's freedom or causing some discomfort, it should follow LIMA. Choosing the technique depends on the trainer's competency. Returning to the example of counter jumping, the dog needs to be startled somehow by the counter. I'm not saying a remote collar. I could have. At that instant, the dog is showed the safe object, like a chew toy. Let me just see. I don't want to bore. I think I should actually take you through how I would do this. But all right. The dog needs some motivation to avoid jumping on the counter. Now the dog will actively avoid the counter and controls. I'm so sorry, guys. I don't want to read you this. And this,
please.
I'm going to do this.
Please
right.
do, because now that you went over the concepts around LIMA, it's now going to stick out like very, very clear. All right. Like I see what you're doing. We don't want this. If this dog is up on the counter, because I'm going to say right now, the person who wrote you these letters, her own dog's 12 years old, is not allowed with the family in the kitchen or anywhere where there's food because it still jumps on the counter, still grabs stuff that are potentially dangerous, even with a hot stove. So the dog is.
Yeah.
I cannot hold it in. The people that are telling you not to give this dog a better quality of life, their own dogs are now at the end of their lives still not hanging out in the kitchen, left in the other room, in danger, burning themselves by jumping on the hot stove. Go on, Peter.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Please,
all right,
please read it all because you're gonna educate.
Okay, and maybe you're right. Yeah, and just imagine a wonderful reader here, okay? And it's only a couple more paragraphs. The dog needs some motivation to avoid jumping on the counter. Now the dog will actively avoid the counter and controls what he would like to avoid. At that instant, he is going through an internal reward. See avoidance and safety training in Lindsay. This is adaptive. After walking by the counter a few times, any fear of the startle is gradually countered conditioned. The dog becomes relaxed and confident. There is no fallout. This is science-based. And this follows LIMA as it was intended. The dog can now move freely in the kitchen. There's more opportunity for the owner and dog to have positive training. Then we can use treats and teach plates and all the rest. The dog's life is better. He likes it this way. Meanwhile, the owner and dog have averted a harm. The dog could eat something dangerous. Also, the owner's frustration decreases, and now there is praise and affection. These good feelings carry over into the next moment. Without that startling event, no new learning would occur. The dog would be just kept jumping and then have to be confined. This is an example of applying an aversive when needed. So that was that. And then someone...
And Peter,
yeah.
this is... I just want to stop here. That sounds wonderful, right? Like now I'm telling you, you just... improves someone's life. This poor dog, because I just want to stop when you go on, because I just want to make a comparison, because I know damn well, and I know you won't say anyone's name, and it doesn't matter. I don't have any need to say the person's name, because this represents anyone involved with kicking you out. They have dogs that live their whole life grabbing dangerous things. I know of dogs that have died taking pills and stuff like that off of the table, burning themselves, stuff like that. People that get frustrated, don't have good relationship with their dogs because they're always yelling at the dog or something because it's jumping up on there. You are doing something, and I know we're not going to go into the science, but read Steven Lindsay's book. It's almost common. It should be common sense when you say it, because the same thing happens to us. When we understand how to avoid harm in the real world, it sure brings our confidence up, and we really enjoy ourselves in otherwise places that would make us nervous. All right, it's predictable. Dogs are smart. We're talking about related to the invisible fence system. Peter, in plain English, Peter is talking about using something that the dog dislikes enough, an aversive, right? We're going to go back to our chart here because it's all right here. He needs to know this. Something aversive, minimally aversive, to be effective, not too little, not too high to cause other problems, or at the wrong timing or in an improper way to cause more problems. He's competent. That the dog can definitely understand. That's the dog, instead, we're doing dead dog rule. He's just not focusing on making a dog not go on the counter. His end goal, his job is not complete until the dog is instead. He's not like, let's not make the dog jump on the counter. He's like, let's train this dog to be in this room and enjoy something with the family. You know, if they're eating dinner, he's hanging out chewing their bone. He's teaching them something a dead dog can't do. And the dog has freedom. The dog can walk around with the family. The dog could go in the other room if he wants. The dog's not in a crate when they're eating dinner or stuff like this. This is what Peter Lynn, the boogeyman, is talking about. All right, it's too dangerous for the public to have access to, all right, according to them, because they would rather recommend someone who's going to go in and say, no, we can't do that to your dog. My dog is just fine. I just managed the situation, all right? That's not what we pay people money for. Some people, they want to spend time with their dog, and it makes as much sense to them as it should make sense to anyone who's really been listening to Peter talk. Okay. Can I add
to what you're talking?
Yes.
Okay. So let's just go through that example. All right. So the dog is there. So let me just tell you what happened next, but then we'll talk about that. The IBC received a complaint alleging that you have repeatedly defended the use of aversive stimuli as the first line of intervention in training and behavior consulting. Now, I didn't say that. I said when an aversive is needed. The complaint alleges that these comments are an indication that no genuine effort is made to avoid the use of aversive stimuli. To clarify, it's the use of aversive stimuli and your repeated statements of defending the use of aversive stimuli to the point of claiming that aversive stimuli are necessary that is the focus of the complaint. So anyway, I responded. I did include all the science. I mean, the response was really, I spent time on it. They said, no, you have 3 options. You can get your membership revoked. You could, if you do not respond by this time, your membership's revoked. Or you can go to the hearing panel, which I said, hey, all right. And the hearing panel asked me, have I used a remote collar electric collar in the last few years, or a prong? And they basically, I was been totally erased from everything with the IABC. Now, let's get to the fun stuff. So to explain this, though, how we might do this from the dead dog rule is, by the way, what happened to me is just a reflection, again, what's happening, right, to a lot of us, or they can. But all right, if you don't mind, I'd like to help here, because you were talking about the bottom part. So let's say we have that dog in the crate, and the owner is worried about the, jumping up on the counter, and that's the best they can do at dinner. And I just see that, and I'm coming to a house, I'm like, ugh. But now I have a way to go, wait a minute, that's not right. I have a way, because I respect the dog's interests, to be out of the crate, and the family's upset by it. So management isn't enough, because if the dog is kept in the crate, right, all that energy can be built up. When they let the dog out, they can become a problem. So we're going to hit the Hydra and Proteus, like it causes more trouble. What you wrote here, restraint, isolation, loneliness, right? The dog's not included. Everyone moves away they're missing all that time together as a family. So it creates problems in the relationship. And there's more to that. But with the dead dog rule, you make it into the dog learns to escape to safety by avoiding jumping up on the counters. Now, this is what's so much fun about this stuff. There's so much technique and fun that you all can come up with skill building. So now what I did, let's say I decide to do this for the dead dog rule. I take the dog outside on a picnic bench. I'm not saying you would do this or anyone here, but it worked with this client. And they were open to it. We taught the dog up, and it jumped on the counter, and we said off. And then we brought up, off, and the dog was learning how to do it on command. And then we put a ball on and we said, and the dog went close, and we said off, and the dog hesitated, because we also would, if we needed to, we step and we walked away and threw the ball. Then we tried it with food, off, and we went there, and then later. But so the dog couldn't get the food or nothing, and then it might go, okay, up. So now what's nice about that is the dog is learning the concept of jumping up and off. It's a nicer way to do it. The dog's getting the concept. I can't, only by permission can I jump up. I'm not saying it can jump on the kitchen counter. I'm saying the dog's learning how to mask. Oh, wait, only when I'm told to, because I like to jump, but not now. So then you bring the dog into the kitchen. The dog is making a prediction, okay? And in this case, the family calls the dog the creature, because it just comes in the kitchen and they can't stop it. And all of a sudden it jumps up thinking, oh boy, and it's feeling a reward. And then let's say you could do upside down. I'm going to actually give a technique, upside down mouse traps, or even a shaker can, which you have to be very careful of, but I'd have pennies in it. Grabs, I would maybe say I'm trying to think, glove. Help me out here. I don't cook. Let's say it's a towel, and it grabs it, pulls it off in the form of a towel. And all of a sudden there's a visual, there's also a sensation, there's the jump, there's all its senses, the visual, the sound is all hitting in. Also what I might do is put a scent and dab it on the towel, and in the can with cotton, you might put like citronella, let's just pick one. So now there's a scent as well. And the dog, this is my mistake, is I said startle. And this is important. This is a aversive surprise, because it's not physical. Startle in Lindsay's work is more about pain, right? This is an emotional pain, right? It doesn't mean it hurts. It's just to its brain, whoa. And the dog comes off the counter, and then we immediately showed it the bone, the safe object. Within those 15 seconds, that object can become safe. And so that's what, and then we only after a while, we might take the dog out, we dab the counter with the scent. And that's enough, just very lightly, for the dog to go, hey, I'm turning away from that. I'm turning away from that. So that was an example of what's so much fun about this. But this type of training takes a lot of brain power, so it's sort of self-limiting. You can't see like 6 people in a day. You have to, otherwise you'll do things by like rote. You have to really, who are the people? What works with them? But that's an example of how you might, be creative and build the skills from the actual ethics. And at the same time, you're just modeling being a friendly, happy dog, someone with a dog, and teaching them how to do it. And so they're getting that feeling too. That goes a long way. So does that give an example of how we might run through these again with that? That's what I was trying to show that. And that's why it's reward-based training, right? Because it's still reward-based training. It really is happening that way. So
and another way to, I mean, you did mention this before. I would just like to clarify too, is a lot of these techniques that you're talking about, if they're effective, right? Like, it doesn't happen often. It's like 2-3 times would be a lot for something like that to happen to a dog. And then the rest is, it's the fun, positive stuff, where otherwise you would never even have the dog be in that situation to be able to get to that point, to have all the fun in the kitchen, off the leash and things like that. But you have to understand all this, and you have to really consider all this in the decision making process. And it's very like it's very clarifying, right? It's clarifying, and it feels good to know you're making a decision that you're helping someone, and you don't have to second guess yourself because it makes sense, right? You're improving lives versus these rules. They're just you're not allowed to use that. You're not allowed to use, you're not allowed to use
Oh, that's very good, by the way. Can I add one thing? Sure. Yes, I'm sorry, but I forgot. The dead dog rule is a rule, and it can be broken. So, like, I just want you to know that's different than a principle. So, let's say there's an excess of barking in an apartment. I'm sorry, just want to make sure. But also is that you might need, you try a white noise machine. That sometimes works because there's people upstairs. But let's say it doesn't. That's where you might need, and there's very advanced little, bark collars that might teach the dog, whoa, I better stop. And what's happening, you're not destroying the dog is getting controlling the emotional, the minimally, the aversive startle or the vibration, the minimal surprise and it calms down and it quiets down. And that can save someone with the dog in their apartment, because this is real. It's not rules of, oh my God, it's going to make it worse. Now, I'm sorry, Michael, there's one thing they have on there. If you want to be a member, and my hope is new members who look at this of their group go, this is wrong. We should walk away, because they're really not understanding what a dog is. The organization is created for all animals. They don't understand the dogs evolved with us to handle this. They have an anti-stress. They can live with us. It's amazing, as Steve Lindsay said, they're so problem-free trying to live with us. But they have a thing where if you want to use a remote collar, you have to go through a whole form, a really difficult form, like elaborate, and talk to the clients about all the fallout with, and this. And then you have to wait weeks, I don't know how long, before they give you an approval. And just imagine that. And one quick example, I had 2 clients that I met a long time ago. They came together, they have a dog that was going after the cat. And it was really distressing the man and the wife. They were having at odds a little because she wanted to be patient and he's worried about the cat. I needed to use a remote collar. I did some other training, but at some point I needed to teach the dog, and boom. And just quickly using that, and they understood, the dog turned away, and we did all these other things. We now at Fetch, I have beautiful photos of this, and the dog now sleeps on the same dog bed, and the cat, they sleep together. And the dog chews a bone. This was not possible. And if I had to actually stop and go, look, like you said, I need to make a phone call. I'd love to help you, but we have to wait a month before this organization really gives me permission. Even though that's my obligation then is to the wrong place, because my obligation is to the clients to avert harm, provide benefit. And when I mentioned that once on the IBC, they suspended me a lot for certain suggestions. But I just want to give I needed to throw that in there because that's the kind of stuff where they're training tools that can be very valuable, all of them, Lindsay, they're all in there, and he even tries to make them least intrusive. He has on a slip chain, he put a little O-ring like a key ring to stop it from clamping more than necessary. But these are all such valuable tools that take competency, that can save dogs where nothing else would. And it's not about the tool. It's just about, being against tools is anti-ethical. It's not, and they're anti-training. So I didn't mean to end on a negative note, but I'm just trying to say that this is what's so nice about this. And maybe there's ways, this brings us together, maybe that's one positive. I mean, I would have never had this opportunity with you. So you want to end it more on a positive note? There you go.
Yeah. I mean, as far as the IAABC, right? Do you have anything before we close it up with them, and where we suggest trainers, what they should do going forward? Are you satisfied with what we said, about the IAABC?
About them?
Yeah.
I guess the last thing I'd say is, they're all about ethics, and there's even ethic PhDs on the committee. To be fair to Steve Lindsay, it's been fully misrepresented. It's very clear it's been distorted, and it can damage his work. And I think the ethical thing to do is to have something that codifies your own beliefs, come up with some different name, because nemesis, that is your nemesis. It will cause you more trouble and don't use it. You're basically stealing it from him in a wrong way and causing him trouble. It's not very fair. And that would be it. It's just, anyone who knows how much this can help you, and someone now could be, I don't care about LIMA, that thing's junk, where it's not true. So just, that'd be my one thing, is do the right thing, if you're about that, and just change it, just remove it. That would be important to me about that. If they would do, that's been my whole thing, either get it right or remove it. And that's really what I would love to happen.
I think that's a very reasonable suggestion, Peter.
And I got to do this. I got to read this quote. Have no respect whatsoever for authority. Forget who said it, and instead look at what he starts with, where he ends up, and ask yourself, is it reasonable? That's Richard Feynman, the scientist. And he also, one more, says, listen carefully to nature, not to tell nature how to behave. And if you ask me, that's very relevant to what we're talking about, both those. I know I said those a little quickly, but, it's not reasonable what they're doing. And it's reasonable. This is reasonable. And this listens to nature. That one does not. They're telling it what it does. They're making up some imaginary dog that doesn't help in people's homes.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
Peter, we're going to close this out. I cannot thank you enough for sharing your insights and experiences, not only with me, but with the listeners. I hope that that trainers, especially new trainers, or even trainers that have been in it for a while and something just does not seem right, could have gained something from this conversation. And I hope that this dialogue continues with other trainers, especially trainers that are involved in these organizations, and they can truly dig deep and think about the heart of the concepts that we really talked about, and who we really are serving, right? Are we serving our reputation, or are we serving the dogs and their owners and their quality of life? So I want to thank you. I want to thank, I feel like I also have to thank Steven Lindsay, even though he's not in this interview right here. I mean, what we're looking at is a reflection of it's his life's work, and this is not information that he put out just to make a buck. It's like the guy's heart and soul is put into here. anyone that has met him is he is an emotional, like, caring person who loves and cares about dogs and that relationship.
And our profession.
And the profession. So I want to thank him for putting this out. And yeah, it's sad what's been going on out there, but we'll close it off. And thanks again, Peter. And hopefully,
thank you, Michael.
Okay, thank you. You have a great night. Okay.
You too.
Night, Peter. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.